Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here. So my talk today will explore the changing nature of journalism as a space of contested power relations and networked communities. We'll be focusing specifically on how online news organizations have gained legitimacy online. This study actually serves as the first empirical investigation into how digitally native news organizations in the United States, digitally native specific organizations, became legitimate. It's based on close to 200 hours of interviews conducted at prominent online news organizations in the US. And what was revealed in my data was that the field of online journalism was actually formed through a series of scandals. I'll present these scandals by focusing on 3 pioneering news organizations in the US. This includes Breitbart.com, the Drudge Report, and the Huffington Post. Media scholars have previously argued that a major problem for journalism is that it tries to tackle the technological and social transformation of today with the logic of yesterday. When the field of online journalism first emerged, notions of traditional journalism were threatened as bloggers, citizen journalists, and online writers infiltrated an industry which at the time had a stagnant professional logic. This is where the turning point occurs. So to begin, I conducted a 6-month ethnographic study in the US, moving to Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, DC, at which point I discovered an emerging subfield of practices and power relations with online news organizations accumulating varying degrees of social capital in order to legitimize their role within this evolving ecology. The clicker and I haven't bonded as much as I'd like. There we go. In order to understand how online news organizations have emerged as key sources for information over the past decade, it was essential that I spoke to high-profile informants in order to analyze this space in all of its complexities. This actually included spending 3 weeks shadowing Andrew Breitbart in Los Angeles. This was months before his death in 2012. The most interesting element of interviewing Andrew Breitbart was how willing he was to have someone shadow him for 10 hours a day. I met his wife, his children, I spent time at their house, and I sat in every meeting that he attended. Following his death, I actually had some follow-up questions. At this point, Steve Bannon, who was then executive chairman of Breitbart News, agreed to be interviewed in person in New York and allowed me to sit in on his controversial morning radio show. Given recent events in the US, the data that I collected has been very revealing. Sorry. There we go. So the first organization I'm going to talk about is the Drudge Report. So in 1997, Matt Drudge was the first blogger to move away from vanity postings into news aggregation. The Drudge Report marked an important stage in the history of blogging by introducing online users to content aggregation. This hadn't been done before. Drudge would curate relevant news items and write his own headline, directing online readers to various news items that appeared on other websites like the New York Times, the Associated Press, etc. Drudge reformatted the standard of content that appeared in the blogosphere, critically examining and commenting on mainstream news. Specifically, which he's become quite famous for, is scooping the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal from Newsweek. The Drudge Report's coverage of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal has been termed a defining moment in the history of online journalism. Drudge became a legitimate player in the subfield of online journalism by first identifying the interconnected nature of the field of journalism, and second, by infiltrating it in a discrete manner that many had overlooked. For Drudge, the strategy was very, very simple. He built a network comprised of media players rich in social capital, and then leveraged his relationship with them for news stories, often betraying their trust for the sake of a scoop. According to the interviews that I conducted in the field, it was revealed that in the early days of his website, Drudge would spend his time in newsrooms, trying to absorb information about what reporters were writing. And then, before their story was published, he'd often reported it on his site. He achieved new media prominence by breaking stories before the mainstream press. Former Newsweek editor and editorial director for the Huffington Post, Howard Feynman, explained in my interview that the success of Drudge's reporting on the scandal lay not in revealing that the scandal had actually taken place, but that Newsweek was attempting to break the story first. As he explained, Matt Drudge was the first to realize that what went on in a newsroom was a gettable story in itself. He would hang out in newsrooms or work the phone of reporters to find out what they were working on, and then he would try to break it on his site before anyone else would break it on theirs. The key to his success is not his conservative bent, it is caging stories out of the newsroom of the establishment, reporting on reporters. That is how he got the Lewinsky story. This forced us at Newsweek to put the Lewinsky story online before it was published in the magazine, and this is the first time we'd ever done that. Drudge's news item was that Newsweek was reluctant to publish his story. Drudge's news item was that Newsweek was reluctant to publish a story about the President of the United States having an affair with a 23-year-old intern. For Drudge, the story was never about infidelity, but about the editorial compromises made based on political agendas. Drudge scooped Michael Isikoff's story of a century, and as he explained to me in our interview, the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal was a sweet, generous gift to Drudge. He still holds a bit of a grudge for Drudge. Now, Arianna Huffington. In examining the origins of the Huffington Post, many individuals whom I'm interviewed pointed to John Kerry's unsuccessful presidential candidacy as of pivotal importance in helping mobilize America's liberal elite at an intimate gathering at Huffington's estate in Brentwood, California in 2004. While Drudge gained prominent recognition through the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal in 1998, thus crafting this image of a Washington whistleblower, the Huffington Post attained notoriety by positioning itself initially as Drudge's official Democratic doppelganger. Following US President George W. Bush's victory over John Kerry in November 2004, Huffington rallied key players of the Democratic media complex to, quote unquote, win back the White House. As opposed to drawing predominantly on members of Congress or local politicians, Huffington opted to bring together celebrities who possess distinct social capital, whether through their reputation, their public visibility, or membership in a desired network, and the ability to mobilize other like-minded members of the Hollywood elite. Now today, this would be seen as a natural strategy. However, in 2004, overlooking politicians in favor of celebrities or liberal influencers in order to create political momentum was actually viewed as quite scandalous. Huffington's brunch attendees included comedian Larry David, Hollywood mogul David Geffen, movie producer Brian Grazer, screenwriter Aaron Sorkin, television producer Norman Lear, Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks, and Rita Wilson, amongst others. James Boyce, a political consultant who attended the brunch, explained to me during my interview with him that, quote, everyone who mattered to her was there, and there was enough power in that room to set Washington on fire. Once Huffington launched her site, she relied on many of these key players to write exclusive stories and comment on news items that benefited them. She used their names and the social capital affiliated with them, and in return gained exclusive news information for her site, separating herself from competitors. Huffington strategically engineered an editorial business model that prioritized social relationships for editorial gain, thus providing her with the social capital she needed for legitimation. Huffington created the first news site that drew on the social, political, and cultural capital of America's liberal elite. She wants to stay up there for a bit longer. There we go. Andrew Breitbart. Andrew Breitbart garnered degrees of social capital by creating an echo chamber, where he became a leader against the left. His tactic was land-based liberal players of status while socializing with conservative players of status. While Huffington and Drudge gained recognition from both peer and the public, Breitbart began to do the same by following up and reporting on sources sent to him by his readers. His readers sought him out and provided him with sources for stories because he positioned himself as an outspoken critic of the left. After breaking a key political story based on a scandalous tip from one of his readers, he became recognized as a legitimate player in the field of online journalism. On May 28, 2011, a sexually explicit photo of Senator Anthony Weiner was posted on bigjournalism.com, which is one of Andrew Breitbart's websites. Senator Weiner was a former US representative who served New York's 9th Congressional District. He resigned on June 21, 2011, following a sexting scandal uncovered by Breitbart. The sexually explicit photograph was obtained using Weiner's public Twitter account, which at the time had about 40,000 followers. The photo of Weiner's erect penis concealed by boxer shorts was sent to Jeanette Cordova, a 21-year-old university student from Seattle, Washington. Cordova had been one of Weiner's Twitter followers at the time, and the link to the photo was removed shortly after being posted. However, a screenshot of the original message taken by a user identified as Patriot USA 76 was tweeted to Breitbart shortly after the incident, and Big Journalism posted the story on May 28th, one day after the photo was initially posted on Twitter. When the allegations first appeared online, Weiner denied them, arguing that the image could have been manipulated. Liberal bloggers blamed Breitbart, accusing him of planting the photo and the accompanying tweet. On June 16th, 2011, at a press conference in New York, Weiner admitted that A, he had sent the photo, and B, that his account had not been hacked. Breitbart also appeared at the press conference demanding an apology from Weiner. The Anthony Weiner episode was one of Breitbart's greatest victories, though not because of his reporting on the public pressure that ensued that led a congressman to resign, but the victory for Breitbart was cultural. At the time, traditional media tried to bury the story, first by ignoring it, second by taking Weiner at his word, and then by smearing Breitbart and his editorial team. Breitbart, then an independent Los Angeles-based web editor, had scooped the national media, and although the mainstream press couldn't silence him, his reporting was accurate. So the three examples of scandal that I presented to you very briefly this afternoon represent pivotal moments in media history, where the balance of power truly did change forever. 10 years ago, three online editors in the US, Andrew Breitbart, Matt Dredge, and Arianna Huffington, created a space online that changed traditional norms of journalism forever. Thank you.
Great. We have some time for audience questions, so it'd be great to hear from some of you in the audience what you've been thinking as you've been listening. Things that spring to my mind are trust in media, which I know Nick Manning has been writing about in The Media Leader. Is there anything anybody would like to comment on it? Yep, right at the back. Have we got a microphone?
Hello, Ben Titchmarsh, Propeller Group. I loved the talk, particularly the reference to wieners. Never ceases to crease me up. I'm just wondering whether in the desire that new media channels have to sort of break a story first, the sort of downside to that is that they're not able to do the really in-depth reporting that creates a Watergate, a Sunday Times formaldehyde reveal, big expose. Do you think there's a duality or a sort of downside to this need to be first that means you're not getting those big stories? Or maybe is that an outdated view and that getting the scoop is all important?
I think it's the latter. And so included in this study originally was the Daily Beast as well. And I remember when I went to their offices in New York, I asked them how often they were sued for libel. And the in-house counsel said daily. So they didn't care if they were not posting correctly, for example. They actually had in their newsroom a board with all the reporters' names on it, and you wanted your number at the top in terms of how many readers you had. It didn't matter if your story was true or not at the time. So I think in new media, at least when this data was collected, it was really about getting the scoop and then fact-checking later. I don't think that's right, and I think that's really changed elements of journalism, but that, at least from the data that I collected, was really what they were focusing on.
Could we grab a microphone here at the front, please? Because somebody that we've got in the audience is Nick Manning, the co-founder of Manning Gottlieb OMD. And Nick's been somebody that's written a lot about trust in media. I'm a media leader. I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on this.
Well, I've got several, but the thing that I'm most concerned about right now is just how far the polarization of political opinion as evidenced through media is going to go. So we had an example, I think, over the weekend where Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying at a convention or a conference, the Democrats are literally killing Republicans now, based on virtually no evidence at all. But that's a pretty extreme thing to say. How much further can this go, and how can we stop this increasing spiral of political rhetoric going further? Because this is going to end up with guns on the streets the way things are going.
I agree with you. I think it's going to get a lot worse than before it gets any better, to be honest with you. I think at this point it is about extremism. It's not in a religious or political way, just in terms of how outrageous or outlandish you can be when you're actually talking. So sentences like Democrats are literally going to kill Republicans. That's a way of, again, getting more readers to certain websites. And I think people are going to the nth degree because that's the currency within this space. They just want eyeballs. They just want readers. And unfortunately, that is affecting individuals from a variety of perspectives. So I am worried that it's going to keep going. I don't know what will happen in the end, who's going to be left to sort of save media in the US at least, but I think it's going to keep going because that's the currency. People just want eyeballs on their sites, so they'll say the most salacious thing to get people there, unfortunately, and then to get them to retweet it or repost it.
I'm afraid we are out of time. I know there was a couple of extra hands up. We are out of time. But I'm sure Gillian will be about afterwards if you'd like to go and grab in the coffee break after this session. So for now, we're going to move on to an interview with and American Express.